Will the brand new union of Peter Parker and Otto Octavius be enough to defeat the threat that is Supernova? Or will this team-up be tragically short-lived? Well, let's hop into the pages of Superior Spider-Man issue number 3 and find out together, shall we? So then, picking up directly from where the last issue left off, Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man decided to put their ages-old feud aside ever so briefly in order to try and save the life of Anne Marconi, a woman who they both cared deeply for, who was kidnapped by a very vengeful Supernova who has a vendetta against Dr. Octopus as well as the Superior Spider-Man. The two super scientists decide to put their egg heads together in hopes of building a device that should be able to neutralize Supernova's amazing abilities. It's while doing this too, Peter, get this, puts together an entire elaborate logic tree explaining how Otto Octavius actually redeemed himself and became a true hero at the end of the original Superior Spider-Man book by willingly giving up his body to Peter so that he could defeat the Green Goblin and, ironically enough, also save Anne-Marie from another bind. Of course, that was the way the story used to go, then things get kinda hazy. What with a couple Spider-Verse adventures, some robots, at least 2 different clones, and one deal with the devil that Spider-Man and admittedly Otto also don't seem to remember. Basically, this is a big fancy way of saying that Peter would happily have worked with the Doc Ock who had learned his lesson at the end of that original series, but this guy in front of him right now is sadly not that guy, and he still has a long way to go. This also feels like Dan Slott getting kind of meta on us for a second, like, man, my story was pretty great in a vacuum, wasn't it? Then comics had to happen. And eventually wrote away everything I wrote in favor of maintaining the status quo, but hey, what are you gonna do? Now, what's going on with Supernova while all of this is going on? Well, she's imprisoned Anne-Marie, who once again proves why she's probably one of my favorite modern Spider-Man love interests and comic supporting characters by actively going out of her way to use her own big brain to try and save herself. At first she says that she's a gourmet chef and that if Supernova plans to kill her, then the least she could do is allow her to cook her own last meal, right? And when that doesn't work, she decides to go all psychological warfare on Supernova by playing into her own chronic sense of claustrophobia that was brought on from all those years locked away. It's good stuff, I like it. While that's going on, Pete and Ock decide to enact the next part of their plan. They're going to need a rare power source if they are going to run the brand new machine to defeat Supernova, and the only way they can get their hands on one is by raiding an old derelict Dr. Octopus base hidden at the bottom of the ocean. To get there, they make use of the squid sub, or maybe it's the cephalopod. Again, Spider-Man and Otto have their own little debate on what a better, more clever name would have been, showing that even though they're enemies, they're actually capable of having pretty funny banter back and forth with each other. Now, the underwater base that Spider-Man is being sent to here is actually interesting for several different reasons. One, it's not just any underwater base, it's actually the underwater base from the original famous Master Planner arc. As Pete says, he actually had a really important moment of growth as a human being in this place. Otto thinks it's stupid, saying, how could you possibly have grown as a person? I escaped you that day, don't you remember? Only for Peter to regale him with the story of finding the strength to lift all that wreckage off his body if it meant saving Aunt May, of whom Peter currently had a bunch of life-saving medicine on him. This story actually affects Otto more than you might think, especially because he hates the idea of hating Aunt May, a woman who he always liked, even when he wasn't actively trying to marry her to gain a nuclear power plant, but that's a whole other story. The other reason this base is fascinating is because it's still actually staffed by an army of Otto's most fervent Superior Spider-Man supporters who have actively been waiting here this whole time and pulling a salary in hopes that their boss would one day return to them. Again, this also feels like a bit of meta-commentary from Slott, wherein we the reader who have been holding out for a new Superior Spider-Man book are the bearded henchmen just waiting on the bottom of the ocean to get what we want. It's here Peter as Spider-Man is forced to stretch his acting muscles, tricking the henchmen into thinking that he really is Dr. Octopus, which is easier said than done. Peter doesn't know how to use the claws on the suit. Otto would have fought first and asked questions later. Also, Otto actively tries to hurt people in fights while Spider-Man goes out of his way to try and fight defensively. And even once Pete actually does manage to get the henchmen back under his control, he absolutely has no idea what to do with them because, well, he's never had henchmen before. If nothing else, Ock's loyal followers lead him to what they've been protecting this whole time, a vault filled with quatnium, basically a better, more powerful, more refined version of tritium, the idea being that Supernova was born of tritium experiments. So naturally, the only way they're going to defeat her is if they have something a lot more powerful. Peter also decides to go off script and let all these henchmen go, returning to their lives above sea level, where if Doc had his way, he would very happily have just kept them in servitude. Now the clock is ticking for our two heroes right now. Supernova had given them 24 hours to present themselves to her lest Anne-Marie dies. Now they only have 7 hours left after this excursion. Pete is totally ready to start the next leg of the plan when unfortunately Doc Ock ends up showing his true colors and pulling a good old-fashioned double cross. You see, the earpiece that Otto has been using to feed Peter information this whole time has actually been rigged to knock him out. You see, Otto never actually planned to use that quatnium to stop Supernova. He was going to use it to power his machine so he can once again take control of Peter's body, the idea being that before Peter proved he was superior by defeating a foe that Otto couldn't, but that here in this situation, Dr. Octopus is actually the one best equipped to taking down Supernova as he's defeated her once before. I mean, he's not going to ask Peter's permission, he's just going to go ahead with it as the comic ends. And so that was Superior Spider-Man issue number 3, everybody, and after the last issue I wasn't really sure what to make of this series, but I gotta hand it to Dan Slott. This one came back with a vengeance and I'm hooked all over again. Peter and Otto actually have a really good back and forth this issue. They're just the perfectly mismatched buddy cop for this type of adventure. All the other callbacks to their long history and publication, but also the callbacks to the original Superior Spider-Man run I felt were really rewarding. And it helps make this new Superior book feel like a true sequel and not some sort of half-hearted rehash. Also, while I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point, I think it bears repeating, it's just really nice to have a Spider-Man story where Peter Parker is an active participant in his own life and he just doesn't fade into the background. Here he's actually doing stuff, making choices, and acting like a hero, which, man, crazy idea is something I enjoy seeing in a Spider-Man book. Overall, I think I'd feel comfortable giving this one an 8 out of 10. I think this book is finally coming into its own and I'll actually be really excited to see what the next issue holds. Hey there everyone, it's your old pal Cape Joel again, thanking you so much for watching to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, why not check out my Amazon link down in the description. Yes, that's right, the Cape Joel channel officially has its own Amazon storefront now. You can pick up a comic or anything else for that matter, and if you did, you'd really be helping me in the channel. So with that out of the way everyone, I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.